Hello there. Now last week we looked at an exceedingly large coffee brewer, and I thought this week we would go in the exact opposite direction with one that is rather small. So let me grab it. It's a heck of a lot easier than last week. In this bag is the Espresso portable espresso maker. This is a nifty little coffee brewer that I picked up for its rather unusual shape, but I thought we would look at it today because it's an interesting kind of example of a mixed bag of some things that are really, really cool and some things that are a little bit tricky, but more on that later. For now, let's break this apart. As you can probably tell, this is a portable coffee maker that is geared towards folks who are outdoorsy. Backpackers, hikers, campers, all of that. Comes in this very nice bag that clips shut that you can either stick into a backpack, hook onto a backpack, what have you. And for all of you who might be wondering how much this all weighs, because I understand that's something important for backpacking, this entire setup is just over a pound. Now, inside this bag, we have quite a few things. Let's break them apart one at a time. Once more, as a little showcase, you get this nice bag. We have the primary body of our brewer, the Espresso, if you will. We have a nifty little coffee scoop that is actually dual purpose in a way. We'll get to that soon. This is a brewer that is compatible with both Nespresso pods and also your own coffee pods, which is what we're going to be doing today. However, if you are using the Nespresso pods, you have these two components that allow you to place those within the brewer. And then we have our collection of coffee pods. These are pretty standard to these types of portable espresso makers. You pile your coffee in there, it brews at the bottom. What is nice about these though, is first of all, you get 4 of them. Usually you don't get 4, usually you maybe get 1. However, another thing I also really like about these is that they come, all of them, with little lids, meaning you can easily fill these up ahead of time. They seal very nicely and toss them in your bag and use them as you go. Okay, let's put all of that over there. Let's look at the body of our brewer. Starting off at the bottom, you have this cup that you can brew into and drink, and it nicely slots back on the bottom when you're done. Then, working our way up, we have the chunk that is essentially the portafilter. This is where your pod will go, whether you are using your own pod or an espresso pod. Okay, moving up, we have our water chamber. This is double walled. It is plastic. If you look in the top, you can see a small metal filter. At the bottom, you have your little pokey bit that will stab through the top of your Nespresso pod. Some things about this. On the side, you have markings for different shot styles and also amounts of water. So working our way from the bottom up, we have the ristretto shot, which is going to be 25 mils of water. We have your traditional espresso at 40 mils. Then up here, we have a big boy lungo at 110 mils of water. Overall, this has a capacity of about 120. You can use these, you can not use these. They're nice little like indicators, so you don't need a scale or anything. As I mentioned before, this is all plastic. It's double walled, which is nice due to the fact that we're going to be putting hot water in here, and it's nice to be able to hold it without burning your hand. Then simply on the top, we have the kind of pump that we're going to be using to force all of that water down through the coffee bed. Interestingly enough, this is not like a plunger pump. This isn't a button on the front like some of the more popular portable espresso makers. This is actually like a little lever scenario, which was the kind of interesting shape that initially drew me to this brewer. As you can probably tell, there is a lot of plastic involved here. This is pretty par for the course with these sorts of espresso makers. This was about, I want to say, between $55 and $60 in total. We will be putting hot water in here. For some people, it's a deal breaker. For some people, it's not. It's just information for you to have. Okay, those are all of our things. Let's make some coffee. Now we're gonna use a scale here today. However, if you were out camping and using this, you would have already probably pre-weighed all of your coffee. And as for our coffee, I have some freshly ground right here. Now, this is a tiny bit coarser than an espresso grind. It is definitely much closer to espresso than it is pour over or anything like that. The instructions for this brewer kind of say, just use ground coffee of any type. Don't use something that is close to espresso. All right, I've got some water heating up on the back. Let's fill up one of our pods. Now, one of the things that I think is very, very clever that absolutely tickled me is the fact that these pods fit perfectly into our scoop. So Pop that right in there. It's nice, it's not gonna move. And the idea is that, let's say you are someone who has a big bin of ground coffee per se. You can now just kind of scoop out however much coffee you want. This is a cute little design thing. Now, if you were like me and you're gonna be weighing out each of your amounts of coffee, this also means that this isn't gonna like roll around. It stays nice and stable. Now these pods have a initial fill capacity of about 8 grams of coffee. So finely ground, just kind of shovel that in here. Okay, 8 grams. Now we're gonna tamp. And here's where that extra function of the scoop comes in. So you'll see here at the bottom, it's slightly compressed in a way that fits perfectly onto your pod. So just kind of gently tamp here. Here's one thing that I found a little bit tricky. I love the idea that this bottom component is your tamp. However, one of the tricky things about it is that it doesn't actually allow you to tamp anything. This is more of a distributor than anything else. What it's doing is just leveling off that bed of coffee due to the fact that where this kind of locks in and meets its full resistance against the pod isn't deep enough to tamp down anything. So, something that's a little bit tricky. But let's see how we brew. Pop that in. Screw that together, unscrew this, a lot of moving pieces. And we're gonna fill to about 40 mils. I'm not too concerned about filling this while it's just sitting on the counter. There's not enough pressure or anything for this to fall through. Now this is gonna be a pretty big boy shot already. Remember, this is 8 grams of coffee to now 40 mils of water. Let's use our provided cup. Slowly, at the cadence of about 1 pump per second, we're now gonna begin extracting our coffee. You may notice your portable espresso maker is somewhat screaming at you each time you do this. It's fine. Continue on. At some point, you'll start to feel pressure. And then your brewer, it gets a little bit spitty here. It's just wailing, isn't it? It's such a sentient sound that it's making. All right, after all of your water is pushed through and those final drops come out, you kind of just have to find a location to place the brewer. I'm gonna get like a towel here, kind of set it on the side as there's still gonna be very slow drips coming out. Okay, we have made some coffee of sort. Now, this little cup of coffee that we have brewed does have some visible crema on top. One thing to note is that crema is not necessarily an indicator of quality of espresso. It's an emulsion that happens between the gases and then also the fats and oils in the coffee as it's extracted under pressure. It's also an indicator of like how freshly roasted the coffee is. But it's a nice thing to see. It usually indicates we're going in the right direction. This does look body-wise like a pretty thin shot, but ultimately taste is always king. So let's stir and let's enjoy. I like to imagine that you have very carefully packed your backpack with all your weight components, with this brewer and everything, and you also bring a demi spoon. Whoever that person is that does that, you are my best friend now. Cheers. It tastes about how you would expect it to taste. At this ratio, it is pretty under-extracted, it's pretty watery. It's not overly offensive to the palate. I'm one of those people that I would usually prefer to drink an under-extracted cup of coffee than I would an over-extracted cup of coffee. That's just kind of like a personal preference, but I could imagine this being passable in the morning out in the wilderness. However, having brewed on this many times, there are a couple small things that we can do to make this cup even better. So let's brew again and let's improve. Of note as well, the cleaning of this brewer is pretty simple. The primary thing you have to do is just make sure that you get rid of your coffee in here. So I'm gonna go open this up over a sink. I'm gonna rinse out my pod, dry everything off, and we'll be good to go. I don't know if y'all wanted to see my coffee bed, but there it is. The first thing that we're gonna improve about this brewing and drinking experience is we're going to get a separate cup. Be right back. We're getting this not only because I prefer not drinking out of plastic, but we're actually gonna use this instead of a drinking cup as a stand. So when we're all done brewing, we have a place to set this. The next thing we're gonna do is increase our dose of ground coffee. So we had 8 grams before. That fits very nicely into this untamped. However, we're gonna be applying some tamping pressure and also creating a larger bed to tamp down. So I'm gonna shove 10 grams into this thing. This may require a little bit of finagling as you go, but it is well worth it. As you go, kind of lightly compress everything. Okay, that right there is a heaping 10 grams of coffee. But that means now when we go to tamp, there's enough coffee in here that we will actually be tamping everything down rather than just lightly distributing the top. It's gonna create some nice pressure as we brew in a way that we weren't creating before. And additionally, this ratio is gonna be a little bit tastier. Okay. This is a very funny tamping experience, but I enjoy the novelty of it. Okay, when you tamp at that amount or more, you can actually feel that compacting happen within the bed. Pop that back in. Screw this back together. And this time around, I'm only gonna fill up my base to about 30 mils of water. This is gonna give us a 1-to-3 ratio. Should be pretty tasty. Fill up to the ristretto. And a little bit more. Okay, then we're gonna go back to plunging and I'm so sorry everyone, we're gonna have to hear this coffee maker scream a little bit more. This is one of the more off-putting brewing sounds I've ever heard, but I'm in this game for the novelty of it, so it's a thing that's happening. Okay, carefully hold your brewer atop your cup. Make sure you're aiming here. Let's begin. It sounds like it's grunting each time. Now we've got more resistance in that puck, so it's gonna be a little bit spittier in the beginning. Just push through that. Oh, it's so pitiful. This is the most pitiful brewer I have ever heard. All right, continue to make sure you're aiming correctly. All right, now once your brewer stops wailing, you should be good to go. And we now have a nice little catch cup. So we've got a much shorter ratio here. Visually, this looks a lot more like espresso. However, we rely on taste. So let's stir and enjoy. Cheers. And hey, it tastes a lot better. All things considered, this is a pretty funky brewer. The reason I picked it up was because of somewhat of the novelty of this pump shape. It's pretty unusual. It's not what you usually see. It works fine. One of the things that is kind of an issue is the creakiness of all of it. Additionally, because you have this sort of momentum here rather than just a straight up and down, it's a lot easier to kind of miss the cup, if you will. I'm trying to make this not sound like peeing as much as possible. But at some point, it's just, there's really a lot of aiming happening, and you want to be as still with everything as possible, which this pump makes a little bit trickier. A lot of the design elements of this brewer, with the bottom being a tamp, with it also being a security lock for your scoop as you fill your pods, a lot of these things I really, really, really love. Additionally, this thing, if you use it correctly, if you feel confident in making some recipe alterations, and brew some pretty tasty travel espresso. With that being said, I'm always curious about your opinion. If you are an outdoor person, if you're a camping person, which I will be totally honest and say that I am not, I'm always curious what you think about this. So without further ado, I'm gonna go clean this up. I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of my espresso. And this was the Espresso, a fun, tricky, wailing little portable coffee maker. I'll see you all next time. Have a good day, everyone.